BMW just unveiled the all-new i3, which is not the descendant of that weird thing. But it's the new version of their 3 Series, the core of their lineup, for the first time with an electric motor. So, 3 Series and electric in the same sentence might sound strange to you, but I don't care. We're not discussing its range or charging today, since there's something more interesting. I checked the comments under BMW's posts about this model. The least we can say is that opinions are very mixed. And what gets people reacting, either positively or negatively, is its design. And honestly, I'm only showing you a few of them here. There are many comments from people who dislike this style and see it as a betrayal. While there are occasional positive comments, they're rare, about 1 in 10. The main issue is her. After months, even years of teasing, we finally have a vision of what the Neue Klasse style would look like on all production cars. A style that was first revealed to us on the Vision Neue Klasse concept from 2023. Then it arrived in production on the iX3, one of the brand's best sellers, and now it's being applied to a sedan. That's a very important point that we'll see just after, because this sedan is the Series 3, which has existed since 1975. So, the least we can say is that it's a symbol. BMW is touching its backbone. All week long, I spent each of my evenings closely examining this new i3, analyzing its lines, its proportions, and the strategy it represents, to try to understand what upsets people and what's going on. For the brand and for me, it's much more than just a design change. So is this car a real BMW? What is its hidden strategy? And above all, why is it so divisive? That's what we're going to find out now. When BMW first applied its new Klasse style to a production car, it was on the iX3, which started production in October 2025. Okay, some people were surprised or shocked, but in terms of reactions, it wasn't at all the tidal wave we're seeing with this new 3 Series. And that's logical, because the 3 Series at BMW isn't just any car. When the iX3 was unveiled, the new design was introduced on an SUV. And even though it's one of the Bavarian brand's best sellers lately, the SUV format doesn't carry as much emotional weight as a sedan. Fans know very well that an SUV at BMW is a relatively recent silhouette. It's an important commercial segment, but more opportunistic since it's not linked to the brand's history. We can experiment without upsetting many, but that's not the case here. Because this time, BMW isn't touching a secondary model, but its absolute icon, which has existed for over 50 years and over the years has become the most important model of the entire brand. The 3 Series is the marker of BMW's identity, the equivalent of the 911 for Porsche or the Alpine Berlinette. No matter what you invent afterwards to fill out the lineup, everything starts from there. More than 18 million have been produced worldwide, nearly as many as the Beetle in 60 years and more than all generations of the Volkswagen Passat. And even if you're not a fan of this car, you have to keep in mind that it's the one that set the modern definition of the premium sports sedan. It established the segment by writing what makes up BMW's identity today. Rear-wheel drive, balanced weight, precise steering, superior handling, powerful engines, and a true driving experience designed for pure driving pleasure. BMW itself described it as a global ambassador of its values. That's no small thing, and that's why a new 3 Series is never just a simple product update. At BMW, it's almost like a vote of confidence in the overall state of the brand, like an indicator of its health. E21, E30, E36, E46, E90, F30, or G20. Every generation of the 3 Series has always been closely watched when it comes out, to see if BMW is still capable of making a true BMW. A 7 Series, that can be strange. With a 4x4, I said we could experiment, but a 3 Series can't afford mistakes. It's the backbone that serves as a reference even for the whole industry. Every manufacturer has tried at some point to make their own 3 Series. It's literally the car that others measure themselves against. And with every version, it has to be just right, balanced, and legitimate. I'd say it carries an almost ridiculous moral weight, which is practically a poisoned gift for the brand. If it feels forced, people say that BMW has lost its soul. If it's too futuristic, they say BMW has betrayed its tradition. If it's too cautious, they'll say BMW doesn't dare anymore. What makes this even more explosive is the coming combustion engine versions. They're showing us a battery-powered i3 with a dedicated platform, next-gen batteries, and new electronics. A new interface logic with panoramic iDrive, a new computing architecture, a new control system they call Earth of Joy, and a new way of designing the front end. In short, this car challenges the mechanics, design, interface, and brand messaging all at once. That would be a lot for a secondary model, but for a 3 Series, it's an earthquake. They specifically named it Neue Klasse for a reason. When the i4 launched, it was simply called i4 despite being an electric sedan. But historically, the first Neue Klasse from the 1960s gave birth to the 3 Series, and above all, it literally saved BMW at that time and helped redefine the brand. Today, when we talk about the first Neue Klasse model, the BMW 1500, the brand itself says that it marked the beginning of a new era and laid the foundations for BMW as it still exists today. So, when the Bavarians bring back this name for the 3 Series, the promise isn't just new technology, it's a real overhaul of its identity. And that's where we get to the most sensitive point, its design. I just told you that the 3 Series for 50 years has helped lay the foundations of what BMW is today. But what exactly are we talking about? There are 3 things that make BMWs different, far beyond their special engines, unique rear-wheel drive, or driving pleasure. Those are things you can only really know by driving them, for the average person. What makes a BMW is, first of all, the grille. A unique grille on the market with its 2 bean-shaped openings called the kidney grills. It's so recognizable that BMW has evolved it over the years without ever abandoning it. Of course, it wasn't invented by the 3 Series since it's been around since 1933. However, it was on the 3 Series that the grille really started to be associated with the headlights, on the same level. Since then, we've seen it in different shapes and all sizes. But it's always been there, and it's always made it possible to recognize a BMW in a split second. These 2 openings for the grille exist because originally engines needed air, but today that's much less important. What do you do with a symbol that no longer serves a purpose? Recently, the brand has experimented, making it bigger, sometimes closed, sometimes illuminated. But with the new model, this transformation goes even further. The grille isn't really an opening anymore. It's a graphic block that merges with the headlights. And the advantage of this element is that it avoids the bucktooth effect by bringing horizontality to the front end. And above all, it could be adapted without too much difficulty to all BMW formats. The second signature element from BMW is the angel eyes. Originally, it's another technical innovation. Since the first E21, all 3 Series have featured dual headlights, giving the car its distinctive look. Originally, it's not unique to this brand, but it creates a distinct impression, which is why BMW will always keep them, whether the design is aggressive, focused, or even arrogant. To the point that it has become a code that they will capitalize on for all models. Recently, with the advancement of technology and especially the introduction of LED, the brand has experimented with simpler shapes like the 2 vertical bars, which have been renamed snake eyes. But even if it's more abstract, the idea remains the same. On the i3, you can clearly see this code, with the headlights following the same angle as the outer design of the grille, so that everything stays consistent. Finally, the last point that is part of the holy trinity of BMW is the famous Hofmeister kink. This little break that you find at the base of the rear pillar, where the window line makes a small hook forward, almost invisible, but present on almost every BMW since the 1500. This little detail is actually named after Wilhelm Hofmeister, who was BMW's chief designer at the time. Now, let me reassure you, technically, it doesn't serve any purpose, but visually, it gives the car a sense of dynamism when viewed from the side. So much so that, if you remove it from recent BMWs, you can see that it immediately looks much more ordinary. It's exactly the kind of detail you don't notice right away if you're not a fan of the brand, but it makes a huge difference. By the way, if BMW ever decides to completely remove the Hofmeister kink from a model, that will be a day of mourning for the purists. On our new 3 Series, you can still find this detail. They didn't take any risks. And with these 3 elements, even without the logo, no matter the model or the year, you can immediately recognize a BMW. So, all of this, if you've been following the channel for a while, you might remember that I explained it quickly in this video. And since the new generation i3 uses these elements, there shouldn't be any problem. Besides the obvious elements that are easy to recognize and use in a new design, there's a more subtle aspect I need to discuss, which I believe is why people struggle with this i3. The proportions. Historically, what also sets BMW sedans apart from the crowd of all available sedans is the proportions. They are quite unique, because the entire powertrain unit has long been unique. BMW is known for its inline 6-cylinder engines. A long engine that requires a long hood, mounted longitudinally and paired with rear-wheel drive. This creates a silhouette with several elements that have become strong markers. The long hood. As a result, with a rather short front overhang, a fairly thin section above the wheel, a very stretched hatch-to-axle line, and often an A-pillar that sits far behind the front wheel, with a very set-back cabin. Oh yes, since the cabin is set so far back, trunk space is limited, even in sedans, and BMW refers to this as the 2.5 silhouette, 1 volume for the hood, 1 for the cabin, and half for the trunk. This set of features works so well to express dynamism that it has sometimes been copied. That's why when the Giulia came out, everyone called it. The 3 Series from Alpha, on this new i3 in side view, there's something off, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. We do have the traditional 2.5 silhouette, but it's thick. There's a lot more bulk than usual above the wheel. Before, even though the designers tried to compensate by playing with the width of the fender to catch as much light as possible, by the way, they did the same thing at the back by adding a line that starts from the taillights. The overhang remains controlled, but the hood is now shorter and less horizontal. This moves the A-pillar forward and makes the hatch-to-axle line more upright. All of this is because the car has a battery in its floor, like most electric cars. Having a battery in the floor, even if it's just a few centimeters thick. You have to raise the seats, which means raising the roofline so people can sit, and that throws off the proportions that always worked. That's also why the vast majority of electric cars are SUVs. Let's say that the extra height is easier to hide, and you can also see this excess at the back, which for me is the most confusing part. Well, the headlights do have an L shape, like all the headlights on the 3 Series for several generations now, but it's less pronounced. We're in the traditional LED strip, which nearly reaches the logo and is common across manufacturers. The rear is very vertical and massive, with the trunk top set high. But maybe I'll get used to it over time, and actually that's the problem. Chris Bangle, does that ring a bell? He's an American designer born in 1956 who worked at Fiat, then at Alfa Romeo, and he notably designed the Fiat Coupe, which already had a very distinctive style. In 1992, he joined BMW and quickly became the head of design for the brand. At the time, BMW made elegant cars and they already had a good image, but it was quite conservative. The typical example is the 5 Series E39, which everyone unanimously found beautiful at the time, but which was ultimately very classic. When he took the job, Chris Bangle wanted to break all the rules. Restore movement to the bodywork, add tension, and move beyond clean yet dull design. So he introduced a key concept, flame surfacing. Literally the idea of shaping surfaces like flames. For example, this results in a succession of convex and concave shapes, which create complex plays of light and sophisticated reflections, making the bodywork look alive. In quotes, and when the 5 Series E60 came out in 2003, it was a tidal wave of criticism. It shocked the press and customers because it was a sharp break from the past. They replaced the clean lines with a more sculpted design. One feature that caught journalists' attention was the Bangle butt, Bangle's rear end. A high and massive rear end with a very pronounced trunk, which would be even more noticeable on the 6 Series E63 and was considered disproportionate and awkward. Chris Bangle was accused of betraying BMW's clean DNA, of making things unnecessarily complicated. It's so shocking for traditional fans that petitions against this design are circulating in fan clubs. What's impressive is that BMW doesn't back down. In fact, the opposite. The 6 Series E63, which comes right after, is even more radical, just like the Z4 E85. And within a few months, the entire lineup adopts this language. BMW imposes a new visual grammar, and eventually, the public gets used to it. What was shocking in 2003 becomes normal in 2007, and many manufacturers start to make their surfaces more complex. At that time, overall, automotive design becomes more expressive everywhere, and the 5 Series E60 sells very well, more than 1.5 million units. In 2003, they released a car everyone hated, but 2 years later, customers accepted it, and 5 years after, competitors copied the design. By the way, does Domagoj Ducati sound familiar? He became head of design for the Bavarian brand in 2019 after joining the studio 10 years earlier. In terms of his responsibilities, he is therefore a successor to Chris Bangle, and he has the heavy task of giving BMW back its visual impact, and he's not going to do it halfway. In 2020, when the G80 series comes out, it's another earthquake. The internet explodes because of one thing, the grille. We go from small horizontal kidney grills to 2 huge vertical nostrils, visually impossible to ignore. And just like in 2003, the press and fans are up in arms. They say it's the ugliest grille in history, that it looks like beaver teeth, that BMW has lost its style. And in the age of social media, this comes with massive mockery, with memes and absurd comparisons. Once again, what stands out is the feeling of betrayal of the DNA. Contrary to what many thought then, it wasn't an accident. There was logic behind the move. Ducati explains that BMW is going back to its history and drawing inspiration from strong models like the 328 or the 3.0 Coupe Sport Injection. In a world where all cars look alike, BMW wants to be immediately recognizable, even in a rearview mirror, to meet a requirement. From a commercial point of view, key markets like China have more and more new brands without identity. But customers love ostentatious designs and value strong visual elements. So, the grille becomes a status symbol. In fact, Ducati is applying exactly Bangle's strategy, making a bold choice, even if it creates rejection, to set a new standard. As in Chris Bangle's era, strong sales show that controversy doesn't stop commercial success. 6 years later, critics remain, but the design is far less shocking and has stood the test of time. Also, just like with flame surfacing, other competing brands have started to enlarge their signatures and embrace very bold front ends. In an increasingly electric car market, whether we like it or not, BMW no longer stands out for its lead in engines, so it has to become remarkable at all costs with its style. That's why they're trying crazy things, even if it means shocking people. And even if it's surprising and doesn't catch on right away, I'm willing to bet that in a while, it'll become the norm. I saw a comment about this that really made me laugh. Remember when we used to get excited for new BMWs? Now we have to convince ourselves to like them as if waiting until we find them beautiful. It's tough, but I get his point. Logically, you could say that if objects end up pleasing people over time, it means there's something that works. Not necessarily in terms of design, but making a car also means taking some risks ahead of time, with the chance of missing the mark. I'm curious what you think about this new BMW in the comments. If you like this breakdown of the new i3's design, you'll love it. Watch this video where I explain how lesbians saved Subaru. Seriously, click here to see it.